Hello! In this tutorial I want to teach you about for loops in Python. It is one of the fundamental programming concepts that you need to get familiar with as you are learning how to program. So what are for loops? Generally, loops allow you to iterate over some numbers or do Hello! In this tutorial I want to introduce you to for loops in Python. For loops are a fundamental programming concept that you need to get familiar with as you are learning how to program. So what are for loops? What are they for? Well, for loops allow you to iterate through items in a sequence, like for example in a list. For loop will take each item in the sequence one by one and allow you to do something with them. So it's much easier to understand on an example, so let's create our simplest for loop. To do that, first let's make a list that will contain 5 items. And now if we want to iterate through each of them, take each one and be able to do something to it, we simply write for item in L in list, and here we will just print item. There you go. So this for loop has iterated through each of the items, took them one by one and printed them out. Note that item is an arbitrary name for a variable, so I could call it E or dub, and it would work just as well. It doesn't matter. And here we put a list. Again, it is just a variable, so instead we would have been able to put a list over here, like so, or even a different type of data, like string. And now it would print each letter one by one, but we will get to that later. So for now you need to remember that for has such syntax. It has a colon, it needs an indentation after it to create a code block, and also note that you can do anything you want in this to the item variable. For example, if I want to add +1 to each number, it will print out each number with 1 added to it. As you have just seen, you can iterate through strings, and also you are able to iterate through tuples and dictionaries. So let's write something a little bit more interesting. Let's write a little program that will tell us from a list of numbers whether a number is even or odd. But before we do this, although you know what, I will leave it for later. Okay, so let's just write it the simplest way possible. Let's create a list that will contain 10 numbers, like so. Then we are going to create a for loop for I in L, for item in the list. And here we will have our if statement, the one I've explained to you in the previous video. So if I type if item modulus 2 equals 0, if you remember, modulus is returns to you the remainder of a division. So any even number modulo 2 will be equal 0. So that's a way to determine even numbers. And here we will print this number. And if I want to also make sure that I tell people that an odd number is odd, let's type it like so. Let's type else print odd. So the idea here is that it will check if a number I'm iterating over is even, and if it is, it will just print the number. Actually, it will even go like so: even number is even. And if I want to otherwise, I will just print the word odd, like so. It will be even nicer if I type number is odd. So there you go. For loop iterates over each number in the list. If statement checks if the number is even and then prints that it is even. Otherwise it prints that it is odd. Pretty neat and simple program. Another important technique you will need to understand is that you can modify a variable inside the for loop. So let's say I want to add up all of the items in this list, get a sum of all of those numbers. It will be very simple. We will first create a variable outside of the for loop. We will call it total. It will be equal to 0. Then I write a simple for loop for I in L, and here I will write total equals total plus I. That is, I'm going to add I to the previous value of this variable. So at first it will be 0, then it will be add 1 to it and assign to this variable. Now this variable will equal to 1. On the next loop, this variable that's already equal to 1 will be added up with 2, etc. And to write this same statement a little bit shorter, I can also type plus equals sign, like so. It is identical to this statement because it will simply take this variable, add the number to it, and update it. And at the end, after the for loop outside of it, I will type print total. Ta-da! So it has run through all of the numbers and summed them up. If you want, you can also print current total, just to understand how this program works a little bit better. So it will tell you what total number looks like. And it's that kind of thing might be useful for debugging. If something doesn't work the way you want, you can always print out one of the variables in the list inside the for loop and see if it behaves the way you wanted it to. Excellent. So I hope you understand this, and now let's move on to tuples. The first thing is that you can simply iterate through a tuple the same way you iterate through a list, because they're in many ways identical. So if I create a tuple 1, 2, 3, and I type for E in T, print, just like with the list, except the tuple was created with parentheses. No difference here whatsoever. But this is not why I wanted to tell you about tuples. Here's a cool thing that you can do. And it will be important later on, so please pay attention because it will be very useful in the future. So let's say I have a list, and it will be a list of tuples. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I have a list that contains three tuples, right? So if I just iterate over it for it will just take each of these elements and print out the tuple in it, like so. But here's what else you can do. You can do something called tuple unpacking. And tuple unpacking means that you take a tuple and get each of its elements one by one. To make it simpler, I will just show you how it works. Instead of I will type here A and B, and A will represent the first number in the tuple, and B will represent the second number of the tuple. So imagine that in each iteration it will take a tuple and put its first number here and the second number there, like so. So here I can just type first number is A and second number is B, like so. As you can see, you can access each of the numbers in a tuple. It will be useful to you in the future because many functions that are intended to be iterated against, because as you can guess, if this can be a variable or just a list or a string, it can also be a function that returns a list or a string. Many functions that you want to iterate over will also return to you tuples. And that means you will be able to access parts of them like so, with tuple unpacking. Okay, so on to the next section. Strings work exactly like I have shown you above. Let's just iterate, let's just point it out. For letter in hello, print letter. So just like I can iterate over every element of a list or a nested list or a tuple, here each element, because string is also a sequence, it consists of letters. Each letter is a separate element, so here it will iterate over each letter in the string. Excellent, wonderful. So here's with dictionaries, we will use what we have learned with tuples. So let's say I create a simple dictionary with three elements, like so. Remember, these are keys, A, B, and C are keys, and 1, 2, 3 are values. So let's say I want to iterate through each of these keys and get all of the keys or all of the values from here. Well, if you remember from the dictionary tutorial, there's such methods that is called items that returns you, look at that, doesn't that sound familiar? It returns you a list of tuples, right? Like many functions, like I have told you before, that many functions will return to you tuples you can iterate again over. So here this function returns you a list of tuples, and each tuple contains key and value from the dictionary. The second tuple contains second key and second value, etc. So if we want to iterate through each key or each value in the dictionary, we simply go for key value in items. Remember, these are the variables, they can have any name you want. It can be A and B, or in this case, for convenience, I have called them key and value. In D items, which is a function that returns a list of tuples. So here I can just print value, and it will print out all of the values for us, or print key, and it will print out all the keys for us. That's wonderful. Excellent. So final thing I wanted to tell you about in this tutorial is how would you iterate over a range of numbers. Like let's say you want to do something to every number between 1 and 100 or 1 and 20. It's very easy. There's such function that is called range. And it allows you to iterate over a number of items. So if I type for I in range between 0 and 10, print I, and it will print each number between 0 and 10. Well, between 0 and 9, because 10 is not included. So that will allow you to iterate over any number of any amount of numbers in order. So there you go. These are for loops in Python. You will get more familiar with them as we go along. We will make a few exercises in the future, and hopefully you will get used to them very quickly and be able to use them to write all sorts of cool, fun programs. The main thing to remember is that you can iterate over every item in a list, or in a string, or in a dictionary. You can use tuple unpacking to access a couple of variables from list of tuples, and you can use a range function to iterate through a list of numbers. So there you go. I hope this video was useful to you, and I'll see you in my future tutorials.